The most productive running back duo in Detroit Lions history just became a mathematical problem that the organization can't ignore much longer, and the solution being discussed behind closed doors at Allen Park might fundamentally reshape our offensive identity for years to come. Welcome to Lions News Fan Report, your most trusted and comprehensive source for every critical update, every strategic insight, and every piece of insider information about our Detroit Lions. I'm bringing you exclusive analysis that connects the dots between roster construction, salary cap realities, and championship aspirations, all delivered with the honesty and depth that true Lions fans deserve. Today, I'm walking you through a developing situation that involves one of the most beloved players on our roster, a strategic decision that could dramatically impact how we build this team moving forward, and a scenario that perfectly illustrates the difficult choices championship-contending organizations must make when managing elite talent. Understanding where the Lions currently stand requires acknowledging the remarkable transformation this franchise has undergone over the past 3 seasons. We've gone from league laughingstock to legitimate Super Bowl contender, from perennial rebuilding project to one of the most feared teams in the NFC. That metamorphosis didn't happen by accident. It resulted from intelligent roster construction, shrewd draft selections, strategic free agency acquisitions, and most importantly, building a team identity centered on physical dominance in the trenches and explosive offensive firepower. Our running game has become the foundation of everything we do offensively, controlling time of possession, setting up play-action opportunities, and wearing down defenses until they break in the fourth quarter. The architect of our ground game renaissance walked through the door in 2023 when David Montgomery signed with Detroit after finishing his rookie contract with the Chicago Bears. That move raised eyebrows across the division because Montgomery was joining a division rival, leaving behind the only NFL home he'd ever known to chase championship glory, with a Lions team that was just beginning to find its identity under Dan Campbell. The skeptics questioned whether Montgomery could be the lead back we needed, whether his physical running style would translate to sustained success, whether leaving Chicago was the right career move. Montgomery answered every single one of those questions emphatically, becoming instantly beloved by Lions fans for his punishing running style, his willingness to embrace the gritty mentality Campbell was building, and his ability to consistently produce in the moments that mattered most. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn that nobody saw coming. The Lions used a first-round pick in that same 2023 draft to select Jahmyr Gibbs out of Alabama, creating a backfield partnership that initially confused some analysts who questioned why Detroit would invest premium draft capital in a running back when they'd just signed Montgomery to a substantial contract. The answer became crystal clear once we saw them operate together on the field. Gibbs brought explosive speed and versatility as both a runner and receiver, while Montgomery provided punishing power and short yardage reliability. Together they formed something genuinely special, a two-headed monster that opposing defenses simply couldn't solve because they represented completely different challenges that required totally different defensive approaches. The production numbers tell an incredible story about just how dominant this partnership has been. Montgomery and Gibbs became the first running back duo in NFL history to each eclipse 1,000 rushing yards in the same season, a statistical milestone that perfectly encapsulates their individual excellence and collective impact. They've combined to give Detroit arguably the most dangerous backfield in football, providing offensive coordinator Ben Johnson with unmatched flexibility to attack defenses in multiple ways, depending on game situation and opponent tendencies. When you need tough yards in short yardage situations, Montgomery delivers with his physical downhill running style. When you need explosive plays that can flip field position instantly, Gibbs provides game-breaking speed. Having both available in the same backfield creates mismatches that few defenses can adequately address. For Lions fans, watching Montgomery and Gibbs operate has been pure joy, a weekly reminder that this organization finally understands how to build a championship-caliber roster. But beneath that surface-level appreciation lies a complicated reality that every NFL team must eventually confront. You can't keep everybody forever. Contract situations, salary cap constraints, and age considerations force difficult decisions about which players represent the long-term future and which ones, despite their production and popularity, might need to be moved to maintain roster flexibility and competitive sustainability. The Lions are approaching exactly that inflection point with their star running back tandem, and the decision they ultimately make could define this franchise's trajectory for the remainder of our championship window. Here's the situation that's generating serious discussion both inside the organization and among NFL analysts evaluating potential offseason moves. David Montgomery, despite his production and his importance to our offensive identity, is emerging as what talent evaluators call a prime trade candidate when the 2025 season concludes. This isn't about performance, it's not about diminished ability, and it's definitely not about attitude or locker room presence. Montgomery remains one of the most productive and respected running backs in football. Instead, this is purely about roster management mathematics, about contract timing, about age curves, and about maximizing the return on talented players before their trade value diminishes. Montgomery will be entering the final year of his contract after next season, creating a decision point where the Lions must either commit long-term money to extend him or face the possibility of losing him in free agency without compensation. Simultaneously, Jahmyr Gibbs will be entering his contract year, meaning Detroit will soon need to decide whether to extend the explosive young back who represents the future of this backfield. The harsh reality is that committing significant long-term money to both running backs probably doesn't make financial sense given positional value trends in the modern NFL and the other expensive extensions this roster will require over the next few years. If Detroit has to choose between extending Montgomery or Gibbs, the age differential makes Gibbs the obvious priority from a long-term roster construction standpoint. That calculation, as cold and purely analytical as it sounds, is what's driving the discussion about potentially trading Montgomery while his value remains high. Trading him after the 2025 season would allow Detroit to recoup significant draft capital or potentially acquire established talent at positions of greater need, rather than either paying him expensive veteran running back money in his late 20s or watching him walk in free agency and getting nothing in return. It's the type of difficult but ultimately necessary decision that separates perennially competitive franchises from teams that get sentimental about players and miss opportunities to maximize roster value. The positions where that acquired draft capital or traded talent could address are obvious to anyone who's watched Detroit this season. Our secondary has been devastated by injuries, exposing depth concerns at cornerback that have occasionally been exploited by elite passing offenses. Adding a legitimate starting cornerback either through trade or with a premium draft pick acquired in a Montgomery deal could significantly strengthen our biggest defensive weakness. The Lions have demonstrated they can win with a committee approach at running back if necessary, with Gibbs handling increased workload and other backs filling complementary roles. But we cannot consistently compete for championships with a secondary that gets exposed in crucial playoff moments. The strategic logic behind potentially moving Montgomery makes sense from pure roster construction theory, but it's important to acknowledge the emotional and practical complications this creates. Montgomery isn't just a productive player, he's a leader, a culture carrier, a physical embodiment of the blue-collar mentality that Dan Campbell has instilled throughout this roster. He's the guy who embraces contact, who fights for extra yards, who sets the tone with his willingness to do the dirty work that winning football requires. Trading players like that always carries risk beyond just the statistical production you're losing. You're potentially impacting team chemistry and removing voices that help maintain the competitive culture that makes championship runs possible. Additionally, we need to consider the workload implications for Gibbs if Montgomery departs. Asking Gibbs to handle a bell cow role with significantly increased carries could either accelerate his development into a true feature back or potentially expose him to injury risk that diminishes his long-term effectiveness. Finding the right balance between maximizing Gibbs's explosive ability and protecting him from the physical toll that comes with being a team's primary ball carrier is genuinely challenging. The two-back system we currently employ actually protects both Montgomery and Gibbs by distributing carries and keeping both fresh for crucial situations, so abandoning that approach isn't without potential downside. The teams that might pursue Montgomery in a trade scenario would likely be contenders needing that final piece to push them over the championship threshold, or rebuilding teams willing to invest in a proven veteran to help develop a young quarterback and establish offensive identity. Montgomery's skill set translates to virtually any offensive system. His pass protection abilities make him valuable for teams with young quarterbacks who need extra protection, and his leadership qualities make him attractive to coaches trying to build winning cultures. Detroit would have significant leverage in trade negotiations because multiple teams would likely compete for his services, potentially driving up the return in terms of draft capital or player compensation. Now, I need to hear directly from you, Lions faithful, because this is exactly the type of complex roster decision that deserves honest discussion. Drop your comment below and tell me straight up, should the Lions trade David Montgomery after next season to acquire defensive help and draft capital, or is keeping our historic running back duo together worth the financial commitment? How much would you be willing to sacrifice to retain Montgomery long term? And if we do trade him, what kind of return would you consider acceptable? Let's have this real conversation in the comments. To wrap this up, here's my complete take on the David Montgomery situation and what it means for Lions fans. Montgomery has emerged as a potential high-value trade piece after the 2025 season due to contract timing, age considerations relative to Jahmyr Gibbs, and Detroit's need to address defensive weaknesses, particularly at cornerback. While trading such a productive and beloved player would be emotionally difficult, the strategic logic of maximizing his trade value before either committing expensive long-term money or losing him in free agency makes sense from a roster construction standpoint. The Lions must balance preserving the special backfield chemistry we currently enjoy against the reality that championship teams make difficult decisions to maintain long-term competitive sustainability and address roster weaknesses. Subscribe to Lions News Fan Report immediately for daily comprehensive coverage of every roster decision, every strategic move, and every development impacting our championship pursuit. Hit that subscribe button right now, activate notifications, and join our community of Lions fans demanding the most thorough analysis available. Share this video with every Lions fan who needs to understand what might happen with Montgomery. Drop your honest opinion in the comments about whether we should trade him or keep him. And return tomorrow for more exclusive breaking news and in-depth Lions analysis. This is where elite journalism meets true Lions passion. 1. Pride.